The day he proposed, I thought it was the happiest moment of my life. That afternoon, the breeze was soft, fireflies flickered across the grass, and his hand trembled as he opened the ring he had saved up nearly a year to buy. I nodded through tears, my heart overflowing with hope for a small home where we would begin a new life built on love and trust. 20 minutes later, I called my mother. I wanted to share the joy, to hear a heartfelt blessing, but on the other end of the line was only a flat, detached voice, as cold as someone reading out a bill. She asked for the wedding date. I told her. Then, there was a long silence, so long I could hear water running in her kitchen. "That week, your sister is launching her project in Bali," she said lightly, as if my wedding were just an appointment that could be moved at any time. I said nothing. I knew what that meant. All my life, I had been used to standing in the background. When my sister stepped onto the stage, I learned to step back. When the family needed someone to sacrifice, I was always the first choice. I used to believe that if I was good enough, understanding enough, patient enough, one day I would be chosen too. But no, this time was no different. My father called that evening. His voice was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Either I changed the wedding date, or they would not come. I stood in the kitchen, my phone burning in my hand, water boiling over from the pot without me noticing. And suddenly I realized that in their eyes, my happiness had never been a priority. That night, I sat by the window for a long time. The ring on my finger sparkled so beautiful it hurt. I understood then that some wounds don't bleed, yet they ache for a lifetime. And there are moments when you're forced to accept that you were not born to be placed first in the hearts of the people who call themselves family. If this story touches you, comment, un. I used to think their silence was the cruelest punishment. But I was wrong. Some pain doesn't come in the form of shouting, it arrives through quiet arrangements, cold and calculated with ruthless precision. 10 days after that fateful call, the wedding venue contacted me. The staff member's voice was hesitant. "Your mother has canceled the deposit. If you don't make the payment again within 10 days, we'll have to release the date." I went numb. After hanging up, I called the florist. The same answer. Then the photographer. The decorators. The sound team. Each phone call fell like a thin blade, slicing away the last fragile pieces of hope I was still clinging to. I sank onto the kitchen floor, a sheet of paper covered in numbers spread out before me. My small savings suddenly felt painfully insignificant. I sold the old car that had been with me for years, receiving an amount that still couldn't patch all the holes they had left behind. I took on night shifts, working until exhaustion, coming home before the sky had even begun to lighten. My hands trembled from fatigue, yet I still sat down to write each wedding invitation in time. The most painful part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing that they were willing to destroy the most important day of my life just to force me to bow my head. Then the rumors began to spread. They said I was ungrateful, a disobedient daughter who had the audacity to forbid her own parents from attending her wedding. Messages filled with blame, insults, and moral lectures poured in like a cold rain. No one asked me a single question. No one cared about the truth. People only needed a dramatic enough story to side with the one they imagined to be more vulnerable. I realized then that some families don't care about right or wrong. They care about power. And in that battle, I wasn't their daughter. I was the sacrifice. In the nights that followed, I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to my heartbeat echo steadily in my chest, wondering, when did family love become the sharpest blade, the one that cut deepest into the place I once believed was safe? If you understand this feeling, comment 1. I thought I had grown used to pain. I thought that after so much hurt, my heart had learned to harden. But the truth is, some blows don't just hurt you, they shatter the last fragile pieces of faith you have left. That night, he sat in front of his laptop for a long time. The light from the screen cast an unfamiliar tension across his face. When I asked what was wrong, he didn't answer right away. He simply slid a thick stack of printed papers toward me. 3 credit card accounts, all under my name, the registered address, my parents' old house, total debt, over 1 billion dong. I read each line. Every number felt like a hammer striking straight into my chest. First-class flights, luxury resorts, an expensive camera, lavish shopping sprees, all of it painfully familiar. I had seen those glittering images posted on my sister's social media. Now I understood the glamour had been built on my future. They had opened those cards when I was 19. When I was still naive, trusting, handing over all my personal documents to apply for a student loan. I didn't know that, at the same time, they were borrowing against my entire life. In that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there for a long time, staring into the empty space in front of me, feeling as if every sound had been drained from the world. What collapsed wasn't my finances, it was the most sacred belief I had ever held. That no matter what, parents would never betray their own child. I understood then that there was no turning back. I could no longer stay silent. I could no longer force myself to play the role of the good daughter in a family that had used me as a tool. Some truths, once exposed, burn down the entire past. But they also set you free. The wedding day arrived. The sky was strangely blue, sunlight spreading thinly like honey over the lawn. 200 white chairs stood in neat rows. Wildflowers trembled gently in the breeze. Soft music drifted through the air, so peaceful that no one could have guessed that, in this very place, a truth was about to be torn wide open. As I walked down the aisle, my parents were nowhere to be seen. For a moment, I truly believed they wouldn't come. But then, halfway through the reception, a familiar car slowly rolled into the courtyard. My mother stepped out first, her makeup flawless, her smile gentle, moving forward like a leading actress entering at the story's climax. My father followed behind, his expression stern, carrying himself like a man who had prepared the perfect script in advance. They hugged me, congratulated me, accepted the applause and the emotional glances from the guests. No one knew that behind those smiles lay a chain of lies and exploitation. When it was time for speeches, my husband stood up. His voice was low and steady. He spoke about the truth, about the debts in my name, about the 3 credit cards, about the luxury trips and the glamorous lifestyle built on my future. The screen behind him lit up. Each transaction appeared, one by one. Impossible to deny, impossible to escape. The crowded space fell into a thick, suffocating silence. A spoon dropped onto the tiled floor with a sharp, brittle clang. I watched my mother's face turn pale, her lipstick trembling. My father shot to his feet, veins straining as he argued back, but every word he uttered became meaningless in the face of the cold numbers glowing on the screen. In that moment, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty, as if a part of me had finally burned out completely. After the wedding, nothing collapsed in a loud explosion. It fractured quietly, like an iceberg melting slowly under the late sun. Messages from relatives grew sparse, then stopped altogether. The accusations disappeared, replaced by awkwardness and avoidance. My once crowded family suddenly felt distant, like an old house locked up, with no key left. My parents didn't call. No apology. No explanation. Only a few short, dry messages, as if I were the one who had caused everything. I was sad, but I didn't fall apart. This pain was different. It wasn't sharp, it was dull, deep, and cold. Yet in that emptiness, I began to see myself more clearly. I filed legal documents, froze every account. Step by step, I fought to reclaim my future. For the first time in my life, I learned how to set boundaries. No screaming, no justifying, just saying no, and standing firm in my choice. Some nights, I lie beside my husband, listening to his steady breathing, and feel a strange, unfamiliar peace. I've come to understand that family isn't the place where you're born, it's the place where you feel safe enough to return. Simple meals, casual check-ins, quiet, windless afternoons, all of it slowly stitching together the cracks inside me. My sister lost her spotlight. Social media no longer sparkled the way it once did. Life forced her to face an unfiltered reality. I don't feel vindicated. I only hope that from these ruins, she learns how to stand on her own 2 feet. As for me, after everything, I learned how to love myself. Without asking for permission, without feeling guilty, without needing validation. Because some journeys must pass through devastation before we are truly born again. I once thought that after all of this, I wouldn't have the strength to believe in anything anymore. But as the days passed, I realized something. When you reach the very bottom of your pain, you are also standing at the threshold of your rebirth. If you deserve to be loved, comment 1, nay. I began learning how to live slowly. I no longer rushed to prove my worth. I no longer tried to please everyone. I allowed myself to rest, to be vulnerable, to feel sad without shame. Some mornings, I would sit by the window for a long time, watching sunlight spill into the small room, feeling each breath, each heartbeat, as if, for the first time, I was truly living for myself. I learned to forgive, not to erase what happened, but to free my heart from the weight of resentment. I came to understand that holding on to pain is like clutching a shard of broken glass. The tighter you grip it, the more you bleed. Letting go isn't losing, it's choosing to live more lightly. I began nurturing new relationships, places where I was heard, respected, and allowed to be myself without constantly bracing to appear strong. Warm meals, quiet handholds, small, simple words of encouragement. Piece by piece, they came together to form something that finally felt like home. And then I realized I was no longer the girl who always stood behind others. I was walking toward my own light slowly, but steadily. I'm not perfect, not wealthy, not dazzling, but I am free. And freedom, it turns out, is the greatest gift after surviving a storm. One afternoon, I stood for a long time on the small balcony, watching the city slowly turn the color of sunset. Rooftops lay still. Streets shimmered in the fading light. In that moment, I understood how far I had come from the girl who only knew how to endure in silence. I no longer wait for an apologetic phone call. I no longer hope for acknowledgement. I've learned that some people cannot give you what they have never had within themselves. And in the end, their silence is an answer too. I began rewriting my own story. Not to complain, but to remind myself. I had been weak. I had been hurt. I had fallen, but I had never given up. I wrote about peaceful mornings, warm meals, exhausting workdays that somehow still left my heart feeling light. Each page became a small piece of proof that happiness isn't something you fight to win, it's something you learn to protect. Sometimes, old sadness still returns, quiet as an unexpected rain. But I'm no longer afraid of it. I sit still, let it pass through me, then rise and keep living. Because I know I don't have to be strong all the time. I only need to be steady enough not to abandon myself. I stopped asking why they could treat me the way they did. That question no longer matters. What matters is that I chose to love myself more, to respect my own boundaries, and to walk a path I decided on for myself. If one day you feel lost, remember, you don't have to become the version others expect. You only need to become the version that brings your own heart peace. And when you are brave enough to live honestly, the world will open in ways you never imagined. I smile softly. The sunset fades. A new day is waiting. Some mornings, I wake earlier than usual, brew a cup of hot tea, and sit quietly by the window. The city is still half asleep, the sky wrapped in a thin veil of mist. Everything feels so gentle that I almost forget the violent storms I once survived. And in that stillness, I begin learning how to truly listen to myself. I realized that in the past, I was always living in a state of defense, always afraid of making mistakes, afraid of being blamed, afraid of not being good enough. Those fears slipped into every decision I made, stealing so many small joys along the way. Now, I'm learning to loosen my grip. I no longer force myself to be perfect. I no longer push myself to appear strong. I allow myself to make mistakes, to feel tired, to be vulnerable without shame. I practice saying no gently, but firmly. Each time, my heart still trembles a little, but afterward comes a strange sense of relief. It turns out that protecting your boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It helps you stay whole. On late afternoons after work, I walk slowly along sunlit streets, listening to leaves rustle beneath my feet, and I'm suddenly overwhelmed by a quiet peace. I've come to understand that happiness doesn't live in grand achievements. It lives in the moments when we allow ourselves to fully exist. I no longer seek validation from those who never truly understood me. I choose to stay close to the ones who genuinely listen, who truly care. And within those simple relationships, I'm slowly learning how to trust again. After everything, the most precious thing I've gained isn't a dramatic story, it's a heart steady enough to keep loving. I'm not writing these lines to complain or to seek pity. I'm writing because it's time to face myself, to face the wounds that were hidden quietly in my heart for so long. For a long time, I kept asking myself, why was it never enough? No matter how hard I tried. I studied well, behaved properly, endured quietly, always put others first. I believed that if I just endured a little more, sacrificed a little more, love would eventually come. But then I realized that some voids cannot be filled with effort. I used to fear disappointing my parents more than I feared losing myself. I stayed silent in the face of injustice, bowed my head before hurt, convincing myself it was my duty. Until one day, I was so exhausted that I no longer had the strength to hold myself together. That was when I understood love is not meant to cost you who you are. Standing up to protect myself did not make me a bad person. It simply proved that I, too, deserve respect. I learned to speak honestly, to set boundaries, to walk away when necessary. Every step was difficult. Every step made my heart tremble, but every step also made it easier to breathe. I no longer resent the past. I see it as part of my growth. Because of it, I've learned to cherish simple things, healthy relationships, and those rare, peaceful moments. This is my story. Not perfect, not heroic, just a person who was once deeply hurt and is now learning how to heal. If you're on that journey too, I hope you'll be patient with yourself and brave enough not to abandon yourself ever again. Some nights, when the city has fallen asleep, I still sit alone by the window, watching the yellow streetlights spill onto the empty road. In that stillness, I hear my own heart more clearly than ever. There are no more tormenting questions, no more silent blame, just a quiet sense of peace slowly spreading through my chest. I've come to realize that what hurt me most wasn't the lack of love, but misplaced trust. I gave my whole heart to people who weren't gentle enough to protect it. And when that trust shattered, I finally understood. Sometimes letting go isn't weakness, it's strength. It means you're strong enough to stop hurting yourself. I've learned to accept that not every relationship is meant to walk beside us for a lifetime. Some people appear only to teach us a lesson, then quietly leave. If we try too hard to hold on, all that remains is exhaustion and pain. I no longer hope for an apology. I no longer wait for belated understanding. Because I know the greatest freedom doesn't come from others, it comes from my own decision. Choosing peace over being right. Each morning when I wake up, I remind myself to live a little slower, to be a little gentler with myself. I cherish the smallest things, a warm meal, a soft hug, a day without tears. These simple moments are enough to remind me that I am truly living. And if someone were to ask me, after everything, what the most precious thing I gained was, I would smile and say, the right to live my own life without fear, without asking for permission, without sacrificing myself in exchange for love. Because after every heartbreak, the most beautiful thing that remains is freedom. One day, I suddenly realized I could tell the old story without my voice trembling. The memories that once made my chest tighten had faded into distant shadows. Not because I had forgotten, but because I had learned how to set them down, gently, like removing a stone from my pocket after a long journey. I began noticing the smallest changes within myself. I laughed more. I slept more deeply. I no longer flinched when the phone rang, no longer lived in quiet dread of sudden accusations. My mind was slowly returning to balance, a place where I could breathe fully again. I made time for the things I had once neglected, reading a few pages before bed, planting a small pot of greenery on the balcony, cooking simple but comforting meals. Each small act felt like a careful stitch, quietly mending the deep tears inside my heart. Sometimes, I think about my parents and my sister. There is no anger anymore, no resentment, only a very light sadness, like a passing breeze. I understand now that they, too, carry their own wounds, their own limitations they were never strong enough to overcome. But that is no longer a reason for me to keep enduring. I chose to forgive, not to erase what happened, but to free myself from the past. Forgiveness allows me to move forward without carrying the weight of old wounds. It doesn't make me weak. It makes me lighter. And in that